Pre-recorded from Casa de Regis in Culver City, California, it's the Reggie N Regis Podcast!
And welcome to the Reggie N Regis Podcast. I'm your co-host, Reggie Bowman. To my left is my compadre, Regis.
Yes, Regis, one name. And normally on the show, we like to keep things mostly lighthearted, but as everybody's aware, the world around us has kind of changed a little bit in the last week or so.
Yes, this is our first podcast since, I believe, May 22nd. And obviously the world, as my compadre just mentioned, has changed a lot. Some for the good, some unfortunately for the worst. As most of you already know, and I would hope a lot of you know already, the tragic and senseless murder of one George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I believe it was last Monday.
Last week.
So this is our first podcast since prior to that unfortunate event, and we're gonna obviously kind of talk about that, how this tragic and unfortunate event has touched not just society but the sports landscape. My personal feelings about all of this, and I've had about a week and a half, more or less, to kind of take it all in. Has been sadness, anger, just trying to make sense of why these particular things happen. I'm sure it happens to a lot of people, but I mean, let's just, the elephant in the room, predominantly African American men and women, young or old, and just trying to make sense of all of it and trying to find a light in all of it. And I've seen a lot of good come from this. I love the fact that people of all different backgrounds and cultures and whatnot are speaking out and making their voices heard, because that's the only way we're ever going to get change in any of this, is if people are continually to make their voices heard. We've seen that not just in the United States, but we've seen that in London, South Africa. We've seen that even in Australia. And it's still continuing to this day, which I'm very proud of. And if anything good can come from this, if any light can be, shown from this, it's going to be of just continuing to send a message that this is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. It's always been unacceptable. And now it's just like, we want change. And I think we've seen that from celebrities. We've seen, athletes speak out. Obviously, politicians. Well, we're not going to talk about one particular politician who we'll leave that alone.
Yeah, we're not going there.
But we're seeing people expressing themselves on social media. Every format, or every platform, I should say, that you can talk about, and it is nice to see that. And that message, again, as I mentioned, is still going strong to this day. I like the fact that a lot of it is now peaceful. It was unfortunate, obviously, over the past weekend, we saw a lot of looting, a lot of things that were happening that were taking away from this message. We don't need that. That's not the impact that we are looking for as a society, But other people, unfortunately, have their own agendas, but whatnot. But now, at least the last few days or so, we've been seeing a lot of peaceful protesting. I took part in one on Monday in my particular neighborhood in Santa Monica. So I'm glad to see that. And, with that being said, it is still a very emotional time, I should say. And, I just think, hopefully just things will get better from here on out, as far as just the change that we need to make us all equal as human beings.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting week and a half. And I say that with the caveat of that I have not seen anything like this in, at least my adolescent life onward, right? Reggie, you and I have both come to LA in the last, 10 years or so, right?
Yes.
And everything I'm hearing from people who've been here a long, long time is saying that the riots that we've seen in our area is nothing like they've seen since 1992 after the Rodney King verdict.
Yes.
And I think the interesting thing, and I'm just gonna go ahead and qualify any opinion I make today by saying that there is no possible way I can ever understand what it's like to be black in America because, of myself being a white male. So again, like, I'm only coming from a certain perspective. But one major thing I picked up on is the power of social media and all this in ways both good and bad, right? Because, when the George Floyd video came out, right? That's one of the most abhorrent, disgusting, unconscionable acts I've ever seen. And yeah, I'm aware that things like that have happened since America was founded, but the fact that something like that can be disseminated to a mass audience so quickly, one, it does get that message out there that changes do need to be made and people do need to be better to each other, at least in those regards. But also it creates a sense of opportunism, right? I was watching, hours upon hours upon hours of news coverage about the riots in the Los Angeles area, and again, I know I'm focusing on that, and we know there have been demonstrations and some violence that occurred in other cities as well. I'm just coming from my perspective here. But seeing the places I know, the businesses I've patronized, my friends' neighborhoods, get vandalized by people who use social media to get together and saw it as an opportunity for whatever gain they could have is kind of the downside of all that. And I know this is going to kind of sound a little Pollyanna-ish from me, but can't we all just be good to each other?
It's so simple, right?
Yeah, I mean life's hard enough as it is. I mean,
exactly.
with the whole COVID-19 thing, and again, I think people being cooped up the last 3 months from COVID-19, I think fueled a lot of the fire here in terms of people's unrest. But like, your hours have been reduced. I lost my job back in April. Life's hard enough as it is. Why do we gotta be assholes to each other when taking care of our own shit is difficult enough as it is in a lot of our cases? And I'm sure that's probably the case for a lot of you listeners out there as well. Exactly.
40 million people are unemployed. We're living in a pandemic, which we still don't have a vaccine for. And we don't know when this vaccine is coming now.
And we don't know what the answers are going to be for the conditions we're living in right now.
Exactly. And, this occurs, and it's just like, can we just be done with 2020 already? I mean,
Amen, dude.
And look, this is just an emotional reaction. I still hoping that we can see some progress for, I guess we are in the 6th month of this year.
Yeah,
so,
we're in the 6th month of this year, and I mean, we keep thinking there's nowhere to go but up, but we just keep getting hit with thing after thing after thing.
Now, with this unfortunate event that took place in Minneapolis, we are a sports podcast. We've seen, obviously, a lot of prominent athletes, speak their minds on social media. And, that's just as a general sports fan, I haven't really focused on when the NBA is coming back. I know they came to kind of a deal that they're going to start up again in July and whatnot.
Yeah, and we'll cover that on future episodes.
And then baseball is also, just at least, seeing athletes like LeBron James, even Tiger Woods has mentioned something. Michael Jordan put out a statement, things like that. It is reaching and to take LeBron out of it, the athletes who never really say anything.
Thank you. That was the point I was just going to make.
Yeah.
There was always the joke 10 years ago. It's like, oh, well, let's get LeBron's opinion on this because he had an opinion on everything. But even the people who you don't really see, speak out that much on stuff, pretty much all these athletes using their platforms to highlight how dangerous of an issue this is has been really refreshing.
Yes, and I guess it leads us to our first take of Drew Brees, and let me preface this by saying Drew Brees has always been a class act, a family man, a man of God, obviously one of the 10 greatest quarterbacks of all time.
Easily.
A guy who's done, I mean, you think about his impact with Katrina in New Orleans.
Thank you.
And I understand that sometimes when we say things, and I've said some things where in the past where I thought it was maybe the correct thing to say at that particular time, which in retrospect, I realized, okay, I could see why it can be looked upon this way. I'd like to think that was what happened with Drew yesterday. But with that being said, with a guy with that kind of intelligence and that kind of class, to be so tone deaf was very surprising to me.
And before we go into it a little bit further, we're actually going to play the clip here in a second. Drew Brees was being interviewed and then was being asked about if they think NFL players are going to be kneeling in protest again, comparable to 2016. And this was what he said in response.
I will never agree with anybody disrespecting the flag of the United States of America or our country. And is everything right with our country right now? No, it's not. We still have a long way to go. But I think what you do by standing there and showing respect to the flag with your hand over your heart is it shows unity. It shows that we are all in this together. We can all do better, and that we are all part of the solution.
Needless to say, he got a lot of backlash from that, from just all aspects, just his players on his own team, guys in other leagues and whatnot. We'll play that next soundbite.
We'll play that here in a second.
From a teammate, a former and a current teammate. But again, how could he be so tone deaf? A guy who's that calculating and that intelligent.
Well, here's the thing. It's the point you made just a second ago that I thought was really, really poignant. I'm sure as he put that answer together in his head, and again, he was being interviewed. It's not like he could have had something like that prepared, right? I'm sure in his head it sounded all right because of the message of unity that he was trying to get across.
Of course.
And if this was 4 years ago when we were having the debate about Colin Kaepernick and some of the other NFL players, kneeling for the anthem, it would have been in a better place at that point. But that isn't involved in what's going on right now. And I'll put it another way. There are only a few people in sports that we can kind of look at as these, stately type guys where whenever they say something, everyone listens because no matter what your opinion is, you'll probably gain something from it. Tony Dungy comes to mind.
Right.
Russell Wilson, J.J. Watt. Drew Brees, easily one of those guys.
Yeah, he's probably right up there.
Exactly. Former Walter Payton Man of the Year. We mentioned his stuff with Katrina. Always says and does the right thing. But here it just seems like he didn't read the room at all.
Right, and this is a soundbite from his current teammate, Malcolm Jenkins. I was going to say Malcolm Butler. Malcolm Jenkins, a former and current teammate of his who obviously has a big hand with the NFL's, was it racial correlation or something like that?
So
basically when Colin Kaepernick went in 2016 and basically when all that was happening, the NFL and some of the players union or players representative started a correlation. The NFL donated like maybe $60 million, I believe.
Yeah, it was. The NFL donated some money. Now, granted, they diverted it from their cancer causes, but that's another discussion for another day. But Malcolm Jenkins was one of the leaders behind that when he was with Philadelphia. Now, again, I know a lot of people complain about them protesting in uniform and on the job, but he put his money where his mouth is. He actually set a lot of good stuff up in Philadelphia to help racial relations, which is going to make his words that we're going to say
right. And so
important.
This is Malcolm Jenkins' response to Drew Brees.
To think that because your grandfathers served in this country and you have a great respect for the flag, that everybody else should have the same ideals and thoughts that you do is ridiculous. And it shows that you don't know history. Because when our grandfathers fought for this country and served, and they came back, they didn't come back to a hero's welcome.
Now, this, just from a technical aspect, this is actually the second soundbite. Malcolm Jenkins originally had one that he had posted earlier, which he took down.
Right.
So I guess he and I didn't get to see what the first soundbite sounded like. You hear the emotion in his voice when he talks about, obviously, Drew Brees and his statement and whatnot. A soundbite which I'm sure some of you have heard already. As I mentioned previously, he was a former teammate of Drew Brees from 2010 to about 2014 or 15, around there.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
And currently is signed with the Saints this past free agency. He's basically stated that Drew Brees is somebody that he looked up to. Drew Brees is somebody who he admired. And, to kind of take that particular stance or have that particular view, you could see in his voice how hurt he is. And I don't blame him.
And not just hurt by, what Drew Brees said, because of, again, his experience with his grandfather coming back and then having to deal with systemic racism even after he served. But also the fact that Drew Brees does have this reputation that he has seen firsthand of being such a great leader.
Yes. And look, my personal take on this is Drew Brees is only going to play one more year. I mean,
Exactly.
That's pretty much kind of like in stone. I don't know. I almost hate to see somebody who has been not just such a great player, but such a class act, a champion, just a model citizen. This be see his legacy tarnished by this particular statement. Look, even if Drew's original thought was pure, his intentions were, were kind of just, not to just to say what comes from his heart. It wasn't the right time to say it. It wasn't not the right time to say it, not in the world that we're living in right now, where tensions are already high because
Right.
of this pandemic. But, dealing with race, that's always a touchy subject. But seeing how George Floyd, he was executed to me.
You could say that.
You can't tell me like anything else. He was murdered right in front of our eyes. And I've only watched the tape once. I should say the video, I should say.
Right.
That was enough for me. The image of that the image of I forget the officer's name, whatever, it doesn't matter.
The guy who had his knee on his
Right.
neck. For
I don't remember his name, but
and
and that image of him with his knee pressed on George Floyd's neck, and you could literally see the life is gone from George Floyd. If you look closely, he's blue, and the kind of reaction that sparked, again, not just in this country, not just in the many cities in this country, but all over the world.
Exactly.
You have to be a little bit more empathetic look, if that's what you believe, that's fine. But you have to use more common sense and to know that it's not about the fucking flag.
Exactly.
It's what the flag represents to us as human beings, as far as all men are created equal, and some of us don't feel that way.
Exactly. What he should have done is something like we were talking before the show, something like Derek Jeter would have done. Taken the question, addressed the major topic at hand, as Drew Brees has successfully so many times in his career. And if he wanted to make a small little button note on the flag at the end, maybe address that with the meat of the message being unity and sympathizing with a group of people that, again, going back to my comment earlier of me coming from a limited perspective, him acknowledging that he has a limited perspective. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And again, this is kind of the sports aspect of it. What's going to happen in the New Orleans Saints' locker room?
I think that locker room is fractured. I'll be honest with you. I think you saw a number of teammates, prominent teammates, Cam Jordan, Mike Thomas, who was, I'm forgetting one more, even Alvin Kamara. They spoke out and those are, I guess, just the main guys. We don't know the lower level guys, some of the O-line O-linemen who don't get as much pub as the guys who have come out, how they feel about it. You don't really repair this because you know what, Reg? That, unfortunately, is how he really feels. Now, in retrospect, and I'm pretty sure we've both done this, we can look back and think, oh, yeah, you know what? Maybe I am sorry. I don't know if he really is or not. He might be.
Yeah.
But I think he realized, obviously, the backlash that he's received. Then you kind of, you spin it. That's kind of what everybody does. I mean, especially celebrities. You spin it, but that original quote or message or statement that Drew put out yesterday, I think that's really how he feels. And I don't think he comes back from it. I don't think, at least in that locker room, he comes back from it.
And in addition to the point you made about, the veteran O-line guys who, are there to protect him and everything, right? Look at all the rookies and free agents they have coming in, right? And all these guys that have looked up to him for so many years and looked at him as a great player, and they're thinking to themselves, oh, hey, I get my chance to play with one of the best players in the NFL.
Emmanuel Sanders is another one I forgot to mention. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And again, this is where my limited perspective comes in here. Maybe the Saints, organization will have a way to bring everybody together. I do not know what the inside of an NFL locker room looks like. I didn't play beyond high school. It's early June right now. Training camp doesn't start till the end of July, August. There's no way I can predict how that's going to look. Maybe they figure it out. Maybe they come together, or maybe it does kind of tear that team apart.
Well, Mike Thomas did come out with a statement on Twitter saying that, okay, I don't got the exact quote, but I'm going to paraphrase just a little bit. Just basically like, okay, he apologized. I know he's my brother. My brother apologized as a Christian man. We're supposed to know how to forgive and move on. It was something like that. Again, I am paraphrasing. I do apologize. I don't have the exact quote in front of me right now. But with that being said, I don't know if that's the response maybe the entire locker room is going to have. You think about the fan base in New Orleans, how, especially, you remember even during Hurricane Katrina, you saw the amount of African Americans that were in a horrible situation as far as, just having their homes flooded, losing their lives, losing everything that they've ever had. How they're going to respond. And, look, the biggest tragedy of all is just a guy who's just been nothing but the symbol of that city since,
for 14
almost
years.
A decade and a half. About a decade and a half. And, I'm sorry, 2 decades and a half, whatever it is. And, just to be tarnished like that. And I think in this day and age, especially how politically correct we all are, nothing is this is not gonna escape him. It's gonna be a small part. You hope in time maybe it'll start to disappear a little bit more, but he's definitely gonna be remembered for this, on top of all the other great things, which I'm sure he's done in the community, that he's done as far as just helping the city recover from Katrina. So, we have to be mindful. No matter who we are, whether we're professional athletes, celebrities, or just kind of regular Joes like us, we just have to be mindful and not kind of just empathy, just like look, as a minority, as African American, I've never been, pulled over because of my color, or just kind of just what's the word, harassed,
right.
Just basically, it's just, but. The ones who, especially the ones who are like a more darker skin complexion compared to me, who stand out a little bit more. I do empathize. Like, sometimes people see me and they'll be like, well, they can't figure out what I am. I am of mixed background. So it's one of those things. I always try to empathize with just like my situation and things like that. And when people tell me, they felt racism and they felt, they've been persecuted and whatnot, it's just like, okay, oppressed. It's just like, okay, like, I understand. It happens in life. It's just, unfortunately, it just does. And I wish Drew kind of, especially having time to really kind of reflect on that, understand that, okay, again, it's not about the flag. People are not protesting or, kneeling because they hate America. They're protesting because they hate some of the things that stand out that is supposed to represent equality. And that's what the American flag stands for, equality. All men are created. That's a Declaration of Independence, right? All men are created equal. But then you're constantly reminded that it's not true. It's not.
Exactly. And from a societal standpoint, how we fix all that in terms of, policy and, policing procedures and things like that, whoever figures that out is probably smarter than anyone I've met. And hopefully we can get to that point with some expediency. But, taking this back to Drew Brees, it's sad to see somebody who's had such a great legacy have this attached to him now. And again, we don't know how that's going to impact him in the long run yet.
We don't. And
we just know it's not gonna wipe away immediately, and definitely not in that locker room.
We don't know exactly. Thank you for mentioning that. We don't know how it's going to impact him even next month, or I guess in August or whenever they're going to start. I guess training camp is the end of next month, so we don't know how it's going to impact him when he sees his teammates again for the first time, and how they are going to react to him. And we'd like to think okay, by that point in time, maybe cooler heads will prevail, but we don't know that. And from my personal, and I'll let this be my final take on this particular situation, I think it's going to be a fractured locker room. I think that somehow, some way will more than likely kind of play itself out throughout the season. I think Drew, I'm hoping Drew has enough clout to at least grab hold of a few of those guys and be like, we know Drew. We know. And just kind of not crucify him as a human being, because I'm pretty sure this is not a bad guy. This is not a horrible human being. But we don't know people's mindsets too, and we do know people tend to carry grudges no matter in what profession.
And I'll have this be my final thought on it. Drew Brees, screwed up, didn't read the room right. He is well aware of that in the apology he made today. And the exact quote from Michael Thomas, I actually have it right here.
Oh, there you go.
It says, "One of my brothers made a public statement yesterday that I disagreed with. He apologized, and I accept it because that's what we are taught to do as Christians. Now back to the movement."
Right.
And that was, of course, what Michael Thomas said earlier today. This is one of those things that definitely, as we've said ad nauseum already, can fracture a locker room. But if there is any leader in the NFL that can figure out how to rectify it and unify a team based off what we've seen, it is Drew Brees. So, again, the repair won't be immediate, but I think it's possible.
Okay, so with that being said, Regis, how about one Colin Kaepernick? So 4 years ago, former starting quarterback for the 49ers, Colin Kaepernick, for a preseason game, sat on the bench because of, I forget which particular social injustice at that time. I do apologize again about that. But with that being said,
Ferguson, Missouri.
There you go. And he basically wanted to make a statement. So he sat on the bench and obviously took a lot of heat for it. So he talked to I believe it was somebody in the armed forces. Was it a Green Beret? It was a Green Beret. And basically listened to what this man had to say. Mm-hmm. And I guess from what I remember about the interaction was basically he's not talking about disrespecting that particular soldier, but basically stating how he, he's expressing himself how he felt like we're being oppressed in this country, and that's not what this flag stands for. So after talking with this soldier, decided to take a knee instead, and basically lost his career. Long story short, lost his career over it, because even though let's just be honest too, Colin Kaepernick's play had gone down since Harbaugh left,
exactly,
or was fired, I should say. And his play, but he was still a very serviceable, even a starting quarterback. You can't tell me Josh McCown whoever, Case Keenum and guys like that are better than him. So basically, and as I forgot who the ex-NFL executive who basically said they blackballed him, essentially. The NFL was just like, he's bad for business, take him out.
Yeah, so actually, Harbaugh left on his own to go to Michigan.
I thought he was fired. He was fired, I believe. No, it doesn't matter.
Anyway, again, we like to be right on the show. So, yeah, over the course of the 2016 season, not just the Ferguson, Missouri thing, but there were protests over something that happened in Baltimore. There were things that happened in Dallas in the year and change up and leading up to the 2016 season. So he started kneeling for the national anthem.
He sat first, then he kneeled.
He sat, then he kneeled. Then Eric Reed joined him, and then a few other guys did it. Kenny Stills comes to mind. And then it drew a lot of media coverage.
Because everybody started doing it. I remember who was the Seattle Seahawks. Oh God, I forgot his name. Doesn't matter. Look, but I remember a lot of teams were starting to pick up on that and started doing it. So the NFL saw it as a problem.
Yes, because there were two things going on. One, I think some of the reason the media was paying attention to it, and again, this is just me being cynical here. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that there was an election coming up.
True.
And
good point.
Secondly, if you take a look at the NFL's historical fan base. Now, granted, the NFL's got fans of, every demographic you can think of, right? Young, old, racial ethnicity, male, female, and any, pretty much any type of person you can think of. The NFL has, fans in that, in those categories. But the NFL's bread and butter, at least in the owners' minds, are kind of the older men who are more traditionalists.
Right. And look, the NFL has shown one thing. These guys might be billionaires and very bright individuals, but when common sense issues come up, they are not the best at kind of figuring out how to kind of navigate and make better of it. I mean, we remember we saw that with the Ray Rice incident. We saw that. I mean, they just drop the ball all the time. Michael Bennett, by the way, was the gentleman who was probably one of the more, outside of Kaepernick and Eric Reed, was one of the more prominent guys who just kneeled and, with the fist up and whatnot. And he, so anyway, getting back to 2016. So after the 2016 season, Kaepernick never played in the NFL ever again. And it's really something that has brought him, and it's not to say that he ever faded away. I remember, in 2018, Nike actually signed him to an endorsement deal.
Yeah,
and he's been working very prominently with Nike. Yeah. I mean, I didn't even realize to what extent, but he, this brings his original message back to life. And not that it ever went away, but it kind of, after 2017, the whole thing, it kind of, the NFL got back on track and was primarily about football. You didn't really see guys kneeling that much anymore, or at least it wasn't, like prominently like just shown to you. It wasn't
as covered in the media.
Exactly.
Now, I for one thought, and again, my cynicism coming in here, I thought the media kind of overhyped the whole kneeling thing, because I think their overhyping of that kind of got away from what the message was, right? Because back in 2015 and 16, when we had all of these incidents of racial injustice, right? That's when you started seeing, a lot of peaceful protests like we've seen in the last week. Maybe not as widespread, but you did see a lot of that.
Yes.
And it seemed like, and again, I might be completely off base here, it seemed like in the couple of years after that, there weren't as many of those instances, or if there were, they weren't as publicized.
And that's why I alluded to earlier. Like by 2018, I think, definitely by 2018, it was definitely about the games. You remember because by even like 2017, we still started seeing some of that residue from the effects of 2016, where even Papa John's, who was a big sponsor for the NFL, was just like, I guess he'd made some controversial statements or whatnot, and this, that, and the other. And we still saw guys kneeling. It was still an issue. By 2018 and 19, it wasn't really that much of an issue.
Oh, yeah. Week 3-4 of the 2017 season, that was all the media could talk about.
Now, with this upcoming NFL season, you better believe it's going to be tenfold more than it was 2016. Now, and as they should, again, nothing is going to change unless your voice is heard. I'm hoping that the NFL will be, and if they're not, then they're just some of the biggest idiots. And I wouldn't be surprised if they still drop the ball again. They would be a lot more sensitive to the issue at hand of what is plaguing us in our society.
Yeah, the big issue I think a lot of fans had with the way the protests were done back in 2016 and 17, with the on-field kneeling for the flag,
exactly.
Mind you. I think the big issue that people had was that these guys were doing it in uniform and on the job, which, and the reason of that being, it's like, oh, I can't do that at my job. If we did that at my job, we'd get fired. Now, a lot of these players, even back at the time, it's not like social media is a new thing in the last few years, right? These players had platforms, and a lot of them did do great work privately to improve racial relations. We mentioned Malcolm Jenkins earlier.
Yes.
I think that was people's gripe with it, that they were taking an opportunity to do something that makes it less relatable to the populace as a whole. And again, that is just mostly speculation on my part, so please take that with a grain of salt. It'd be smart of the NFL to kind of go on your point, to get ahead of it by dealing with, the Players Association and some of the more prominent people who make their voices heard in dealing with this before the season starts. Have a way for that voice to be heard without potentially pissing people off.
That's an excellent point, Regis. That's an excellent point. Deal with it and be sensitive. Be as empathetic as you can, and put yourself in that particular position, all right? And just understand the purpose of it. It's not to trash the league. It's not to embarrass the league. It's not to, even some of these sponsors, I would imagine, and let's be honest, that's who the NFL is going to bed with. That's what they care. I'm hoping some of these sponsors will understand, okay, we get it now. Maybe I might have to take that back. Maybe it's not the NFL owners. They know what's bad for business. Maybe they want to be like, hey, you know what? We believe in that, but we can't do that. It's kind of like you said, like with Kaepernick, doing it on the job. That's a fair point. That's a very fair point. I get it.
And to go into what the NFL owners really do care about, which of course they only care about green. TV ratings did fall quite a bit during the 2017 season, and I think a lot of people thought it was a result of that. Now, granted, the quality of play wasn't as good in 2017 as it was, say, last year, but it definitely seems like there could have been the assumption that a correlation could have been made.
True. It's just they have to do a better job, and I think they will. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I will say that with everything that's going on, and we're seeing it even today.
Right.
There's still protests happening. There's a number of protests in multiple cities, all over the world, that is still going on. This is not an issue that's going to go away, not anytime soon. And I think you're hearing the voices, you're hearing the reaction. I think the NFL, that is, and hopefully their sponsors will come at it in a more, sensitive approach. They'll kind of understand, okay, all right, so what can we do to help? Maybe we can raise more money. Maybe we can donate more money, I should say, and just to kind of help out, certain particular, because they can only control what they can control. Exactly. So as long as they show, I feel like they show, and they're not going to please everybody. That's just the way. That's just the world. Yeah, that's just the world that we live in. You're never gonna please everybody, but as long as they do their due diligence and just show, like, hey, you know what, we're here. We understand. We're not gonna be insensitive to what the needs of society, especially society regarding African Americans. I mean, minorities in general, but African Americans who are being oppressed. So we're gonna do what we can and do our part and just show you that we do care.
Exactly, and they need to start working on something now. And I'll give the NFL the benefit of the doubt here, just because there are so many contingencies associated with the 2020 season already because of the pandemic we've had. So we know they're kind of coming from behind the 8 ball to start out with. But you also have to remember the NFL has some of the most brilliant sports executives that have ever been involved in the world of sports, right?
Yes.
They've been number one in the U.S. for almost 50 years now. They own a day of the week in the fall. It's not like they can't come to a solution when they really need to, but they need to start working on that now, because if they don't, there'll be the perception that they don't care. And with the way the world is going, I'm not sure they can afford that. Look at Drew Brees.
Correct. Good point. Regis, let me ask you this question. Do you think this opens up an opportunity for Colin Kaepernick to come back into the NFL?
Maybe as a quarterback's coach.
Really?
Maybe as a quarterback's coach. Because you have to remember, in 2016, his game was already diminishing.
Yes, but it's not like he was kind of a middle-of-the-pack quarterback. He was a middle-of-the-pack guy. 2 years prior, I mean, he was arguably, well, he was a top 10 guy. I mean, look, he could run, he could throw. But
2013, he was a top 10
guy.
guy.
He was, once Harbaugh left, and, his game kind of went down. It was starting to spiral down. Guys were starting to figure him out, somewhat. But I guess from a political standpoint, do you think, okay, a team is going to look at this and use Colin Kaepernick to capitalize as far as, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not talking from a game perspective, but just to be like, just from, because at least from the sports part of this, he is the face of kind of what this is about. Because what he stood for and ultimately lost his career over is back into the limelight now. So do you think a particular NFL owner who 2-3 years ago would have just been like, as we mentioned before, as we alluded to before, bad for business, can look at it, okay, now we can open a door, at least, look, he's going to be a backup regardless.
Well, you have to remember, he was drafted in 2011. He was 22 years old at the time, right?
Right.
So he's going to be 31 now. He was a mobile quarterback. People are starting to figure his game out. And the reason I mentioned the coach thing was, one, he has not played in a while. And secondly, there's also the discussion the NFL just had about modifying the Rooney Rule for interviewing minority candidates for,
which is absolutely ridiculous,
for head coach and general manager positions. But but the NFL is thinking about having more minorities in coaching positions, right?
Right.
And I think he could serve better as
he wants to play, though. He wants to play,
but I think he could serve better as a coach to mentor a young guy.
He wants to play. I don't think he'll come back unless he gets the opportunity to play. I guess my point when I originally asked you the question was to see, like, if you think somebody's going to just take that bait and be like, okay, you know what, let's just bring him in. Let's just see what we have. Obviously, he's going to get a fair shake at training camp. They're going to see what he has left in his game. I'm pretty sure he could still play in the right system. The right system being the key word.
Yeah, no,
okay,
but, he could get a training camp invite.
But because of what we are going through in our society right now, I think, I think the NFL has softened its stance as far as just wanting to deal with that kind of controversy, because I don't think it's going to be viewed as controversy anymore. Bringing Colin Kaepernick back is not going to be viewed like, oh, well, no, unless you're just a complete moron or a complete bigot and you just really have no common sense. And people like that, I don't really think the NFL, I'm not going to say the NFL doesn't care about people like that, but you know what I mean? Like, people like that
care about their wallets.
Yeah, exactly. If they're watching NFL games, they care. My point is like, that's an opening for him. I think personally, my personal opinion is that's an opening for a team to bring him back without facing any kind of backlash whatsoever from fans. Or, again, as we mentioned, you're not going to please everyone. There's going to be some people that still going, but the ones who have some kind of common sense will look at that as, okay, you know what? Now's the time to do it. I don't think they'll face any backlash from their sponsors. And I think that'll be, I think, in a way, you know how that'll say everything comes full circle? Right. I'd like to personally myself see it happen. So
you're making a roster or even just getting a training camp invite?
No, making a roster. I think he's good enough to make a roster. I think he can be a serviceable backup quarterback if in the right position. Yeah. Could be a starter again. Now, is he going to be elite? Well, he was never really elite to begin with. I mean, I don't, even the year that they made the run to the Super Bowl, I don't think he was like, look, he was something different. It was like him and you remember RG3 was the same year.
Right.
And they kind of ran the same system.
Right.
Where it's like that what would they call it? It was the, whatever it was. But it was,
and then they went against each other in that Super Bowl.
No, RG3 was Redskins.
Oh, that's right, Redskins. I'm thinking of RG3's on the Ravens now. I'm sorry.
Joe Fly. No. You got the right team.
Maryland teams mixed up.
You got the right team. But I do think it'll open up at least a discussion of bringing him back, and I'd like to see that, just to kind of just put a bow on that.
Well, and answer your point, right? Look at some of these guys who started NFL games last year. Devlin Hodges, Brandon Allen. Mm-hmm. There's definitely room there to do it. Whether or not it will happen, those decisions are made by people way above my pay grade.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. It's I hope it does happen. I hope some team will give him an opportunity. With that being discussed, as far as the overall sports landscape, as far as not just obviously the tragic and unfortunate George Floyd situation, but this pandemic going on. I guess just the last 15 minutes we have left, what do you think is going to be the mindset of an average sports fan going forward, as far as just everything that we've seen happen in the last 3 or 4 months, as far as just, again, as we mentioned, the NBA is coming back. Baseball, I'm assuming at some point in time, NFL's going to be going. They'll figure it out. You talk about some of the biggest idiots. If they can't come to some kind of agreement, I would advocate, do not ever buy a baseball ticket ever again.
Yeah, do they not realize that if they do a repeat of 1994, they're killing their sport? Baseball's done. I'm
going to say it again. I'd advocate, do not ever buy a baseball ticket or any kind of MLB merchandise. You are already probably, I don't know, the 4th or 5th sport in this country.
I heard an interesting statistic a few years ago, like 2016 or so. I'm not sure if you saw this. The average age of a viewer of a Major League Baseball game, 54 years old, right? So their fan base is already getting older and dying off. If they do this, if they cancel this season, if the players and owners can't come to an agreement, good luck ever getting the young fans.
Yeah, that remains to be seen. But again, my original question I posed to you: what do you think is the mindset of the average casual fan, like myself and you, and obviously, hopefully, some of the listeners on this particular pod? What do you think going forward? Or do you think anything is going to change, or do you think once sports gets back, we're kind of all going to get back to our normal kind of groove? And
we will in time.
Yeah,
in time. Obviously, I think the leagues and the players are going to highlight, everything that's gone on, not only with, the pandemic and how it's affected, people in this country and a lot of people's economic situations, but obviously they're going to touch on what we've seen in the last week with, all the peaceful protests and everything like that. So I definitely think that that's definitely going to be covered quite a bit at first, but in time, we kind of saw this post 9/11. Sports can unite and help heal wounds. I'm not sure if it's going to happen in the same way it happened 19 years ago, because the world's completely different. But I think in time, we'll be back to normal.
Well, I think even society is very different. I mean, we talk about 2001, and I remember I was 21. Everything was a little bit more carefree. Everything was fun-loving. Now everything is political, Right. Majority of people hate our president, which we're not going to get into. We're a sports podcast. We have this, pandemic with no vaccination. We have, just kind of civil unrest. I mean, we just have so many dynamics and so many. And look, the mindset, again, we didn't have Instagram or Facebook and any of these kind of social. The world and the mindset is just very different than it was in 2001, where it was a little bit, again, it was more good-natured. Not perfect, never perfect, but good-natured.
But I'll put it this way, and I'm not one to put a lot of personal opinions on here. Which would you rather be in right now, 2020 or 2001?
2001.
Absolutely.
As tragic and unfortunate, I remember that day as well. That baseball, and especially I remember watching the ESPN one with the Mets versus the Braves, and on Piazza hit that famous home run.
Yep,
that was beautiful.
I just watched that game the other day.
And if you remember when the NFL came back and just how patriotic they were. And they had just the flags everywhere, and everybody was just feeling good. And as much as we hate them, the Patriots winning the Super Bowl that particular year.
And that first week that we came back after 9/11 was when Brady came into that game for Bledsoe on that Sunday night.
Yes. Bledsoe got knocked out of the game and started the career of Tom Brady. But it's a different world now. And I think we have to be a little bit more... As sports fans, I should say, just kind of, just open to everything. Look, I can't wait for the games to come back, but it's not going to take my mind completely off everything that's going on in the world. So I don't want to fall back into that trap. I think and I was telling us even before the tragedy in Minneapolis, if we all don't come out of this pandemic being better, or at least being more mindful of something, being that, a lot of us are not working,
right?
Are struggling, are just struggling in our own minds with just the things that we normally do. Like, I'd love to meet up with you at, JP's, to just grab a beer and just be in that environment.
God, I miss that.
And we're at home, and yes, we're all trying to, maybe some of us are in better shape. Maybe some of us are reading a lot more, but if we don't come out of this with just a better thought process, and we just kind of go back to our just normal ways of life, then we really haven't evolved as people.
I'll say this. As sports fans, I think we're going to be able to go back to a sports world that is somewhat akin to what we've had in the past. Now, with social media, right, we're going to have, we're still going to have constant reminders of this world that we can hopefully emerge from and become better from, like you said. So I just want sports to go back to be able to being something that can unite us, because let's face it, we've had way too many reminders that we have a lot of things in society and in life we have to deal with where maybe the light at the end of the tunnel isn't fully visible yet.
True. Very true. And we'll see. I mean, that's the one thing about life, we could try to imagine what we'll be a month or two from now or a year from now, but we just have to let everything play out and just naturally take that gradual course of just evolution. I guess that's the best word I can say, is just see, where we're at. Hopefully everybody is able to recover. Everybody's able to kind of get back into their own, whether it's financial or personal, kind of like groove.
Right.
And, it's funny, like you said, you've spoken to a couple people from JP's, and from what I gathered from you, that they're making it. They're doing all right.
Exactly. I think what we all want is for our lives to go back to as close to what it was prior to all this as possible, while being aware of the fact that things are foundationally different.
True. All right, let me give some final thoughts regarding everything that we discussed on this podcast, episode 12 of Reggie N Regis Podcast. Wow, it's funny how it's been about 2 weeks since I've seen you, how much the world can change, like, during that time. What's that old saying, the Ferris Bueller line, life moves quick, you better stop and look around, or something like that. Ferris Bueller honks don't, take your shots at me. I forgot the quote, whatever.
I think it's life moves fast. If you don't stop and look around, you might miss it.
Exactly. There you go. See? Yep.
Didn't even have to look that one.
There you go. I knew it would come to you. I knew if I threw at least a little bit of it, you would get the premise of where I was going.
I knew where you were going with that.
But with that being said, I think going forward, people can, not just athletes or celebrities, but look at this incident that happened with Drew Brees. As far as you have to be sensitive. You have to kind of just. I don't want to tell somebody to think how we all should think, because look, I get it. Some people are gonna say, okay, well, yeah, they're always gonna look at it. Kneeling is disrespectful to our country. They just don't get it. And then, we don't know people's backgrounds and whatnot. I get that. But I would just hope that they use that as an example of a very prominent, a very, just popular guy who made a mistake. He made a mistake in the sense of he just used bad judgment to utter that statement, especially in this world right now.
Exactly. And it's not like what he said was necessarily bad. It's just he didn't read the room right and his timing was terrible.
But with that being said, Regis, I'm glad that it did happen because it's going to keep that mindset going now of there are still people in this world who still have that kind of mindset, who still have that kind of train of thought. And we still need to, speak our mind. We still need to be out there protesting. We still need to be out there, letting our voices be heard because, it's going to keep it going. As unfortunate as it is from a communication standpoint, it's at least going to keep that message of, okay, hey, you know what? We still have a lot more to do because, we don't want people to start thinking, okay, we're doing this right now. Everything is good now. It's not good. We still have to keep it going. We have to keep it going for as long as we can possibly do it. So, I am, thinking back on it, I am kind of happy that it did happen just from a communication standpoint. And my final thought on it is just it's been a crazy, crazy week and a half. Again, as I mentioned earlier in my opening, a lot of it good. A lot of it, you see people uniting, being a part of, not one of the larger ones, but a smaller protest. But I saw a lot of nationalities. I saw a lot of people coming together. I saw a lot of young individuals coming together. And that's what I was very proud of. And, some people were willing to be arrested. And I saw that. I was kind of not one of them because but with that being said, I saw who knew that they were going to get that they were arrested and they want to make their point. So that's how I was very proud of. And I think going forward, we have to kind of continue to keep that message going and let your voices be heard and continue to, if you have a social media account, if you have that, just keep putting that message out there. You don't know who you're reaching. You don't know. I find myself reaching and following a lot more people who are very vocal and outspoken about it because you want, that's what I want to see. So I'm following a lot of people. I'm doing it myself, and I'm not a big social media guy. And just continuing to push that message because the only way we are going to have change in society as far as people being oppressed is to keep that voice and that message going. With that being said, that is my final thoughts on all of this. Regis?
Yeah, we live in a country of about, maybe 300, 400 million people, right? And
yes.
The whole premise of what America was founded on is that we can disagree with each other, but still be respectful at the same time, right? Drew Brees, he made a statement. He was coming from, his perspective. He's trying to unite everyone via the flag when it was clear, to the people who gave him his criticism, it's like, dude, this is not the time for that. With social media as it is, I think we're a lot more aware of how we can get our points across and not offend people or limit that as much as possible, right? We still have a long way to go in terms of communicating with each other and, getting our country to a good place, as you mentioned. But I just think we have to just keep the dialogue going. But in the meantime, be as good to each other as we can be. Because as I said in the beginning of the show, most of the people I've met over the course of my life, and again, this is maybe I've been lucky. People are mostly good, but sometimes we have to recognize when people aren't good to see what changes we need to make.
Correct. Yes. Very well put, Regis. Very well put.
With that, if you want to let us know what you thought about what we said today, and I know we said a lot, so feel free to be as candid with us as you want. Feel free to email us at Reggie N Regis Podcast at gmail.com. That's REGGIE, letter N, Regis, REGIS, at gmail.com. We are also on Twitter at Reggie N Regis Pod. I understand we're on some streaming platforms as well.
Yes, 6 to be exact. We are on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Radio Public. You can also hear us on YouTube. Look for Reggie N Regis Podcast on YouTube. Let us know what you think. As my compadre mentioned, you could just send us an email. Tell me what your thoughts are. Any content is good content, like I've always said. You could look us up on Twitter as well. And look, guys, stay safe out there. Stay sane
out there.
Stay sane out there as well. You tripped me up there, buddy.
Sorry.
And just know, just let your voices continue to be heard in a peaceful way. And that way, we can hopefully, before our lifetime is over, we can see some kind of change in equality. So with that being said, I am Reggie. He is Regis.
We will see you guys next week, hopefully with a lot more upbeat episode. Be excellent to each other in the meantime, though.
We're out.